There is one behavior that reveals a kind of inner strength most people never develop. It doesn't look impressive on the surface. It won't earn you applause, admiration, or instant validation. In fact, many people might misunderstand it entirely. But according to Carl Jung's psychological insights, this behavior is a clear sign that you are internally stronger than most. That behavior is the ability to remain psychologically stable when you are misunderstood. Most people desperately need to be seen, explained, and validated. When they are misjudged, they rush to defend themselves, to correct others, to prove who they are. Jung believed this impulse comes from an unconscious dependency on external approval. The weaker the inner foundation, the louder the need to justify oneself. Inner strength, however, expresses itself differently. When you truly know who you are, misunderstanding does not threaten your identity. You don't feel compelled to explain yourself to everyone, because your sense of self is not built on their opinions. Jung emphasized that individuation, the process of becoming who you truly are, requires separating your inner truth from the collective expectations of society. This is not indifference. It is not arrogance. It is psychological maturity. The internally strong person listens, observes, and chooses silence not out of fear, but out of clarity. They understand that not everyone is capable of seeing them accurately, because most people interpret others through their own unconscious projections. Jung taught that people don't see you as you are, they see you as they are. When someone reacts strongly to you, criticizes you unfairly, or labels you incorrectly, it often reveals more about their inner conflicts than about your character. The stronger you are internally, the less you need to absorb those projections. This strength is built in solitude. Jung believed solitude was essential for self-development because it forces you to confront your own shadow, your fears, contradictions, and hidden impulses. People who avoid being alone often avoid themselves. Those who face themselves develop resilience that no external opinion can shake. Another sign of this inner strength is emotional self-regulation. You don't overreact. You don't feel the need to win every argument. You can let go of being right. Jung saw this as a sign of an integrated psyche, one that is not ruled by unconscious complexes seeking expression through conflict. You understand that life is not about being understood by everyone, but about living in alignment with your own inner values. This alignment creates a quiet confidence. You move through the world grounded, not defensive. Paradoxically, the more comfortable you become with being misunderstood, the freer you are. You stop performing. You stop explaining. You stop shrinking or exaggerating yourself to fit into someone else's expectations. Jung believed that this kind of inner strength is rare because it requires courage, the courage to stand alone psychologically, even when surrounded by others. It requires trusting your inner compass more than the noise of the outside world. So if you can remain calm when others misjudge you, if you don't feel the urge to constantly explain yourself, if you can sit with silence without anxiety, understand this: you are not weak, disconnected, or passive. You are internally strong. And that strength, according to Carl Jung, is one of the clearest signs that you are becoming who you were meant to be. And this inner strength doesn't appear overnight. It develops slowly, through experiences that test you, disappoint you, and sometimes isolate you. Jung believed that suffering is not something to be avoided at all costs, but something that shapes consciousness. Every time you endure misunderstanding without losing yourself, your psyche becomes more integrated, more whole. Over time, you begin to notice something subtle but powerful. Other people's opinions lose their emotional grip on you. Praise doesn't inflate you, and criticism doesn't crush you. This balance is not emotional numbness, it is emotional sovereignty. You feel deeply, but you are no longer controlled by what you feel. Jung spoke often about the danger of living unconsciously, of allowing the collective mind to dictate who you should be. The internally strong person resists this not by rebellion, but by awareness. They recognize when they are being pulled away from their authentic self, and they quietly return to center. This is why such people are often seen as calm, reserved, or even distant. In reality, they are deeply connected to themselves. They don't need constant stimulation or approval, because their inner world is alive and grounded. Silence, for them, is not emptiness. It is space. Another consequence of this strength is discernment. You become selective with your energy, your words, and your relationships. You no longer try to be understood by those who are unwilling to understand themselves. Jung believed that maturity involves accepting limits, especially the limits of other people's awareness. As this strength grows, fear of judgment fades. You may still feel it, but it no longer governs your actions. You speak when it matters. You remain quiet when it doesn't. You act from intention rather than reaction. This is the difference between someone who lives from the ego and someone who lives from the self. Ultimately, Jung saw this quality as a sign of psychological freedom. You are no longer imprisoned by the need to be liked, approved of, or constantly validated. You become responsible for your own inner life. And this is why remaining steady when misunderstood is such a powerful indicator of inner strength. It shows that you have begun the work most people avoid, the work of knowing yourself. If this resonates with you, it may be a sign that you are further along on this path than you realize. Not louder, not more visible, but deeper, steadier, and more awake. And in a world driven by noise, that kind of strength is rare. This depth brings with it a quiet responsibility. Jung believed that as consciousness expands, so does accountability. When you become aware of your inner world, you can no longer blame others for your reactions, your patterns, or your pain. And this, paradoxically, is where true power begins. You stop outsourcing your sense of worth and meaning to the outside world. At this stage, you no longer need to prove your strength. You embody it. Your presence becomes grounded, your decisions slower but clearer. You understand that not every battle deserves your energy, and not every opinion deserves a response. This restraint is not weakness, it is mastery over impulse. Jung often spoke about the integration of opposites within the psyche. The internally strong person can hold contradiction without collapsing. You can feel doubt and still move forward. You can feel fear and still remain centered. You can acknowledge your shadow without being consumed by it. This ability to contain inner tension is a hallmark of psychological maturity. Because you are no longer ruled by unconscious reactions, you become harder to manipulate. Guilt, shame, and social pressure lose their power over you. You recognize when someone is trying to provoke an emotional response, and you choose not to participate. This is not avoidance, it is awareness. Over time, people may sense this difference in you. Some will feel drawn to your calm. Others may feel unsettled by it. Jung warned that individuals who have not confronted their own inner conflicts often react negatively to those who have. Your stability can act as a mirror, reflecting what others avoid seeing in themselves. This is why inner strength can sometimes lead to loneliness. Not because you are disconnected, but because you are no longer willing to live at the surface. You seek depth, authenticity, and meaning, and not everyone is ready to meet you there. Jung saw this solitude not as a punishment, but as a natural consequence of individuation. Yet this loneliness is not empty. It is fertile. In it, creativity grows. Insight deepens. You begin to sense a quiet alignment between your inner world and your outer actions. Life feels less chaotic, even when circumstances are difficult. Eventually, you realize that being misunderstood is no longer something you fear or resent. It becomes neutral. Sometimes even liberating. You understand that clarity does not come from convincing others, but from staying true to your inner axis. This is the kind of strength Jung believed was essential for a meaningful life. Not dominance, not control, but inner coherence. And if you recognize this behavior in yourself, the ability to remain steady, silent, and grounded when misunderstood, then you are not behind in life. You are ahead in awareness. And that, according to Carl Jung, changes everything. And from this awareness, a new relationship with life begins to form. You stop chasing certainty, because you understand that uncertainty is not an enemy, but a condition of growth. Jung believed that the psyche expands not through comfort, but through tension between what is known and what is emerging. The internally strong person does not rush to resolve this tension. They allow it to transform them. You begin to trust the slow unfolding of your own path. Comparison loses its grip, because you realize that no one else is living your psychological journey. What looks like delay from the outside is often deep inner work taking place beneath the surface. Jung warned that those who skip this work may advance socially, but remain fragmented internally. This is why your progress may appear invisible to others. There are no external markers for inner integration. No applause for emotional restraint. No recognition for silence chosen wisely. Yet these unseen victories shape a character that is resilient, flexible, and real. As this strength stabilizes, your relationships change. You no longer bond through trauma, conflict, or the need to be understood at all costs. You connect through presence, through honesty, through mutual respect for inner worlds. Jung believed that only individuated people can truly meet one another, because they are not using relationships to fill unconscious voids. You also become more compassionate, not less, because when you understand your own shadow, you recognize it in others. You stop personalizing their behavior. You see their reactions as expressions of unresolved inner material. This doesn't mean you tolerate disrespect, but you respond without hatred. Boundaries become calm, not aggressive. At some point, you realize that inner strength is not about becoming unshakable. It's about becoming recoverable. You may still be hurt. You may still doubt. But you return to center faster. You no longer abandon yourself in moments of tension. This, Jung believed, is the foundation of psychological wholeness. And perhaps the most important shift happens quietly. You stop asking, "How am I being perceived?" and start asking, "Am I being true?" This single question reorients your entire life. Decisions become simpler. Regret becomes rarer. Your actions begin to align with something deeper than approval. This is why so few people develop this strength. It requires patience in a world addicted to speed, depth in a culture obsessed with surface, inner listening in an environment full of noise. But if you are here, if these words resonate, it may be because you are already walking this path. Not perfectly, not loudly, but sincerely. And that sincerity, Jung believed, is the quiet force that shapes a meaningful life. Not being understood by everyone is no longer a burden. It is a sign that you are listening to something deeper. And that inner voice, once trusted, will never lead you away from who you truly are. And as you continue to listen to that inner voice, something else becomes clear. You are no longer afraid of standing alone in your convictions. Jung believed that true individuality is rare precisely because it demands this courage, the courage to hold your own ground even when the world does not immediately agree, applaud, or understand. You begin to notice that your sense of direction no longer comes from trends, crowds, or external validation, but from an inner alignment that feels steady and honest. This alignment acts like an anchor. Even when life becomes chaotic, you don't lose yourself in it. You may bend, but you do not break. At this point, inner strength expresses itself through restraint rather than force. You don't impose your views on others. You don't need to convert or convince. Jung saw this as a sign of a differentiated ego, one that knows where it ends and where others begin. Respect for psychological boundaries, both yours and theirs, becomes natural. This also means you become more comfortable with ambiguity. You don't rush to label experiences as purely good or bad. You understand that growth often arrives disguised as confusion, loss, or discomfort. Instead of resisting these states, you observe them, learn from them, and allow them to reshape you. Jung believed that life has a symbolic dimension, and the internally strong person is attentive to it. You start to notice patterns, recurring themes, and meaningful coincidences. Not because you are searching for control, but because you are open to meaning. This openness deepens your relationship with life itself. Another quiet shift occurs in how you deal with failure. You no longer interpret it as a verdict on your worth. Failure becomes feedback, a message from the psyche pointing toward necessary adjustment or deeper self-knowledge. This perspective preserves your dignity even in moments of loss. Over time, your identity becomes less rigid. You are not clinging to a fixed image of who you must be. Jung believed that rigidity is a defense against inner uncertainty. Inner strength, by contrast, allows flexibility. You can evolve without feeling like you are betraying yourself. And perhaps the most telling sign of all is this: you are at peace with your own complexity. You don't need to simplify yourself for the comfort of others. You accept that you are a living process, not a finished product. This acceptance creates an inner stability that no external misunderstanding can dismantle. So when silence feels natural, when solitude feels nourishing, When misunderstanding no longer provokes urgency, understand what this means. You are no longer living from fear. You are living from depth. And according to Carl Jung, that is the foundation of true inner strength, the kind that doesn't seek recognition, yet quietly transforms everything it touches. And from this depth, life begins to feel less like a performance and more like a dialogue with something greater than the ego. Jung believed that when a person aligns with the self, the deeper organizing center of the psyche, existence gains a sense of meaning that cannot be explained, only experienced. You no longer rush to define yourself with labels, roles, or achievements. You understand that these are expressions of you, not the source of you. When they change or fall away, you remain intact. This is why inner strength often appears invisible. It does not depend on circumstances to exist. You also become more patient with timing. Jung emphasized that psychological growth follows its own rhythm. Forcing outcomes only creates resistance. The internally strong person respects this rhythm, trusting that what is meant to emerge will do so when the psyche is ready. As a result, anxiety about the future softens. Not because you have all the answers, but because you trust your capacity to respond. You know that whatever arises, you will meet it with awareness rather than panic. This trust is built through repeated moments of staying present instead of escaping. You may notice that your desires become simpler, but more authentic. You are less driven by comparison and more guided by resonance. What feels meaningful draws you in. What feels empty quietly loses importance. Jung saw this as a natural recalibration of values during individuation. Another sign of this strength is your relationship with silence. Silence no longer feels like a void that must be filled. It feels like a space where truth can surface. In silence, you listen to your body, your intuition, your dreams. Jung believed that the unconscious communicates in symbols, and only a quiet mind can hear them. You stop fearing the unknown within yourself. Instead of suppressing uncomfortable thoughts or emotions, you explore them with curiosity. This willingness to face the inner unknown is what separates growth from stagnation. It is not pleasant, but it is transformative. Gradually, you realize that inner strength is not about controlling life, but cooperating with it. You act when action is needed, and you wait when waiting is wiser. This discernment cannot be taught. It is earned through self-knowledge. And so, being misunderstood no longer registers as a threat. It becomes part of the landscape. You understand that clarity comes from alignment, not agreement. In Jung's view, a person who reaches this stage is no longer seeking themselves in the mirror of others. They have found a deeper reference point. And once you are anchored there, the world can misunderstand you, but it can no longer define you. That is the quiet power of inner strength. And that power, once awakened, never truly fades. And at this point, the journey comes full circle. You realize that everything you once feared, misunderstanding, rejection, solitude, was not sent to weaken you, but to refine you. Jung believed that life challenges us in the exact places where growth is needed. What once felt like an obstacle was, in reality, an initiation. You no longer measure your life by how visible you are, but by how aligned you feel. Success becomes internal before it is external. Peace becomes more valuable than approval. Truth becomes more important than comfort. These are not ideas you adopt, they are conclusions you arrive at through experience. There is a quiet dignity that settles into you. You move through the world without the need to explain your depth to those who cannot meet it. You speak with intention. You listen with presence. And when silence arises, you honor it. Jung believed that wisdom often speaks in a low voice. You also understand that inner strength does not make you superior. It makes you responsible. Responsible for your choices, your reactions, and the way you treat others. Power without awareness corrupts, but power rooted in self-knowledge creates integrity. At this stage, you stop resisting life's complexity. You accept that meaning is not found in avoiding darkness, but in integrating it. Light and shadow coexist within you, no longer at war. This inner reconciliation is what Jung called wholeness. And so, if there is one behavior that reveals all of this, one quiet signal that you are internally stronger than most, it is this: you no longer need to be understood to remain true to yourself. You walk your path with calm, even when it is unseen. You trust your inner compass, even when it leads you away from the crowd. You remain grounded, even when the world projects its confusion onto you. This is not isolation. This is individuation. And according to Carl Jung, it is the highest task of a human life. So if you recognize yourself in this journey, know this: you are not lost, late, or broken. You are becoming. And that, in the deepest sense, is strength.